What does it mean when a child invents a monster to explain himself? Not a storybook creature, not a shadow under the bed, but a beast inside his own chest. A beast that whispers hunger, that demands without pause, that threatens to devour whoever dares to resist. You're about to hear of a case file that was never meant for you. A case buried in the archives of Montreal psychiatry in the early 1960s. A boy, only 6 years old, who became known not for what he learned, not for what he built, but for what he shattered. Teachers could not hold him, parents could not contain him, and psychiatrists, when they finally opened the door into his inner world, found something so raw, so primal, that they stopped speaking of him as merely a child. They began speaking of him as a force. This is not a fairy tale. This is not folklore. This is the file of a boy whose play revealed more than his words. A boy who kissed his dolls until their painted mouths wore thin, who filled their tables with endless food as if to erase hunger itself. A boy who then, without warning, released an alligator into that world. A predator whose jaws demanded everything at once. In that monster, he revealed himself, and in that monster, he revealed us. Because if you listen closely, this is not just about a disturbed child. It is about the blueprint of need, power, and control that lives in all human beings, especially in the societies we have built. The case is not simply clinical, it is prophetic. Now, let me take you into the classroom where this began. Picture it, a Canadian nursery in the early 1960s, walls painted with soft colors, floors scattered with blocks and wooden toys. A place designed for innocence, for songs and circles, for the careful cultivation of patience. And into this room walks a boy named Philippe, 6 years old, intelligent, attractive, eyes bright, hands quick. He looks like any auteur, her child, but within minutes he unravels the order. The circle breaks, the songs collapse. He will not sit, he will not wait. Instead, he demands. The first recorded incident is not a tantrum, not a sulk, but an act of violence. During playtime, Philippe lunges at another child and attempts to choke him, not for stealing a toy, not for teasing, for the simplest reason of all, because that child held the attention of a girl Philippe wanted for himself. This was not jealousy, as you or I would know it. This was possession, raw and unfiltered. When a teacher intervened, he did not retreat in shame. He struck her. He assaulted the very figure meant to be his first symbol of authority. Pause there. Understand what this means. At 6 years old, this boy was already rehearsing the logic of power that underpins every tyranny. If you want something, take it. If someone resists, break them. If authority opposes you, strike it. Do you see the seed? Do you feel how quickly this innocence curdled into domination? The teachers tried their strategies. They offered redirection, gentle correction, patience. But Philippe's presence was different. It wasn't distraction. It was insistence. He refused the circle of collective life. He refused to share attention. He refused delay. The nursery could not hold him, and soon he was removed, referred, upward. That's the phrase used in the file. Upward to psychiatry. Upward to the higher priests of control. But I want you to hold that word in your mind, upward. Because what happens when a child cannot be contained in the circle of peers is exactly what happens when a man cannot be contained in the circle of society. He is sent upward into systems of control, into institutions designed to correct him or to break him. At home, the pattern sharpened. His mother was a strict disciplinarian. She withheld tenderness, punished with slippers and spankings, and spoke of herself in interviews as a failed teacher. His father, by contrast, was indulgent, tired, permissive. Where the mother's voice cracked with severity, the father's voice dissolved into fatigue. Between them, the house was divided, 2 generals issuing conflicting orders on the same battlefield. Do you see the problem? The boy learned that all he had to do was escalate, resist, persist, until one side broke. The lesson was burned into him. Authority is fragile. Push hard enough, and it will yield. And so he pushed. He escalated. He punished hesitation with intensity. The household became his training ground, the classroom his battlefield. In both, he left wreckage behind. The staff wrote it plainly. Philippe was not an ordinary child in misbehavior. He was a child whose hunger consumed every space he entered. And this is where the case takes its darkest turn. When he was brought into the playroom with dolls and blocks, clinicians expected ordinary fantasies of children at that age. But what they saw was obsession, endless reenactments of affection, a husband and wife who kissed and embraced without pause, meals overflowing on the table, more food than could ever be eaten. It was eerie in its perfection, too neat, too insistent. The child was not playing, he was prescribing, he was writing a law: never stop loving me, never stop feeding me, never withdraw. But fantasy cannot hold forever, and into that perfect hold, he introduced the alligator, a creature whose only law was hunger, a creature that demanded everything now, the boy's own creation, his altar, his shadow, his monster. Now, let me stop here and speak directly to you, because if you think this is only about a disturbed boy in 1962, you are already mistaken. This is about us, about the monsters we invent to explain ourselves, about the hunger that modern society cultivates in men, hunger for attention, hunger for control, hunger for possession. What Philippe enacted in miniature, nations enact on global stages. What he revealed in play, institutions practice in policy. And if you are still here, if you are listening this far, it means you are willing to see what others look away from. Most will hear, a troubled child, and close the file. But you and I, we see the blueprint. We see the pattern. We see how hunger becomes control, and control becomes violence, and violence becomes the unspoken law that governs far more of this world than anyone dares admit. This is not a case study. This is a mirror, and the longer you stare into it, the more clearly you will see the beast that lives not just in Philippe, but in power itself. The psychiatrists thought they were studying a boy. They were wrong. They were opening a doorway. When Philippe entered the clinic, they expected tantrums, defiance, maybe crude aggression that could be softened by structure. What they found instead was a map. His play was not chaotic. It was ordered, eerily ordered, like a ritual. Every doll placed, every gesture repeated, every meal perfectly abundant. This was not improvisation, it was doctrine. And then, the alligator. Clinicians watched, disturbed, as Philippe introduced the predator into his perfect world. The dolls loved endlessly, but the alligator demanded endlessly. One law gave kisses without end, the other devoured without end. Affection and hunger, embrace and violence. Two sides of the same coin. The psychiatrists wrote their notes, convinced they were describing a child's pathology. But let me ask you, is it only a child's? Or is it something older, something more ancient, that had simply found a vessel in this boy? Because look closely, the duality he revealed is the same duality written into human history. The embrace of the state, the promises of endless safety, endless provision, and beneath it, the jaws of power, the predator that takes without mercy. What Philippe staged in a playroom was nothing less than the psychology of civilization itself. Consider the timing. Early 1960s. Canada, yes, but in the shadow of global upheaval, the Cold War, nuclear fear, governments selling the dream of security while secretly preparing for annihilation, a child reenacting an endless embrace while conjuring an alligator that threatened to eat everything in sight. Is this merely coincidence? Or was he channeling through instinct the madness of the world around him? Children often speak truths adults bury. In Philippe's hunger, in his demand for control, he was showing us the same sickness that sat in war rooms and parliaments. Feed me, love me, obey me, or I will destroy you. The clinicians tried to domesticate what they saw. They believed aggression was simply an overdeveloped impulse, a lack of socialization, the consequence of parental contradiction. But listen deeper. Aggression is never just behavior, it is survival written in blood. It is the ancient law of domination asserting itself through the fragile body of a child. Philippe was not inventing something new, he was remembering something old, something civilization pretends it has forgotten. And here's the forbidden part. Psychiatrists in the mid-20th century were not neutral observers. They were part of a larger machinery of control. In Montreal at that very time, under programs funded quietly by the CIA and Canadian authorities, hospitals were running experiments on children and adults alike. Experiments in psychic driving, electroshock, and reprogramming of identity. The world calls it MK Ultra now. Back then it was buried in paperwork. Do you understand the implication? Philippe's case was not floating in isolation. He was being studied in the very city where institutions were already working to control not only children, but entire populations. So when they described him as too intense, too controlling, unable to share the circle, they were not only diagnosing him, they were diagnosing the threat every independent mind poses to collective order. The circle, the classroom, the family, the state, all are built on one principle: submit. Sit where you are, told. Wait your turn, share what you have. Philippe refused, and for that refusal, he became dangerous. Now imagine you're in that clinic watching him, a 6-year-old boy, bright-eyed, handsome, but radiating a hunger that unsettles grown adults. Imagine the doctors leaning in, pens scratching across their pads, noting every gesture as if decoding a cipher. They do not say it aloud, but you can feel it. Fear, not of the child's fists, not of his tantrums, but of what he represents. Because here is the truth, they will never print. He was a mirror. He was showing them the raw face of control stripped of its polite masks. Let me speak directly to you now. Do you see how quickly this becomes more than psychiatry? How a single boy's aggression reveals the skeleton of society itself. If a child cannot tolerate waiting his turn in a circle, what does a nation do when denied resources? If a child lashes out when affection is inconsistent, what does an empire do when its power is questioned? The alligator is not a toy. It is a prophecy. This is why the file is disturbing, not because of what Philippe did, but because of what he unveiled. That hunger is never satisfied. That love without limit turns grotesque. That control without resistance turns monstrous. The psychiatrists thought they could treat him, mold him, return him to the circle. But let me ask you, has society ever cured itself of its own hunger? Or does it dress it in rituals, in systems, in polite words, until the jaws inevitably snap again? Understand this. The boy's aggression was not random. It was law. A law older than nations, older than governments, older even than morality. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. It is in the politics you consume, in the corporations you obey, in the devices you cradle at night. The endless embrace, the promise that you will be loved, connected, fed, and the alligator, the hunger that demands your attention, your obedience, your very soul. You were not meant to hear this. You were meant to believe Philippe was simply a troubled boy, a clinical curiosity. But if you are still here, listening, your eyes are already adjusting to the dark. You are beginning to see that psychiatry was only the stage. The real play is far bigger. I will tell you now what the clinicians could not. Philippe's monster was not an invention. It was an initiation. It was the mask pulled from the face of human power. And those who studied him, they were not healers. They were guardians of the circle, priests of control, desperate to hide from the truth a child revealed too clearly, that the circle will always break, that the hunger will always return, that beneath every smile waits the alligator. So, are you still with me? Then you are ready to go deeper. The next step will not be comfortable. It will demand that you stop thinking of this as history and start seeing it as blueprint in T. Because if you recognize the alligator, if you recognize the embrace, then you are beginning to awaken, and awakenings are dangerous. Do you remember the circle? The neat little formation where children sat, waiting for their turn? That circle was supposed to symbolize order, equality, safety. But Philippe broke it. He refused to wait, refused to share. He reached into the center and claimed everything. To the clinicians, this was pathology. To me, it is revelation. Because the circle is the oldest lie we tell ourselves. That power is shared, that everyone has a place. But in truth, the circle always hides a hierarchy. Always. Look at any family. The child who cries loudest is fed first. The parent who earns most commands the most respect. The rules of the circle collapse the moment hunger appears. And Philippe's hunger was relentless. He could not pretend. He could not play along. And that refusal terrified the adults, because they too were living in circles built on illusions. Illusions of democracy, illusions of fairness, illusions that obedience is natural. Here is the wound you are not supposed to touch. Institutions are terrified of children like Philippe, not because they are violent, but because they cannot be domesticated. Every classroom, every clinic, every state requires docility. Take your turn, wait in line, share what is given. A child who resists exposes the fragility of the entire system, and fragility must be hidden. That is why aggression became a diagnosis. Do you understand? Aggression is not only a behavior, it is a label, a weapon. Once stamped on a child, it justifies intervention, sedation, control. The label is never neutral. It is the velvet glove on the iron fist of authority. Aggressive, defiant, disruptive. These are not words about children. They are words about compliance. And yet Philippe's case gnawed at the clinicians, because beneath the aggression there was brilliance. His play was symbolic, his rules consistent. He was not chaotic, he was precise. He revealed more order than the circle itself. That is what unsettled them, because if his aggression was not random, then it was meaningful, and if it was meaningful, then the meaning could spread. Now listen carefully. What if Philippe's alligator was not merely the echo of his family or the symptom of his mind, but the living representation of something these institutions feared above all? Uncontainable desire, the appetite that refuses limits, the will that will not be circled. In ancient cultures, this force was not pathologized, it was worshipped. The predator was God, the devourer was sacred. Civilizations built temples to it. But in the 20th century, under the fluorescent light of clinics, the same force was renamed illness. Why? Because the state cannot worship what it cannot control. Remember where we are. Montreal, 1960s. Psychiatry is not operating in a vacuum. Behind the walls of hospitals, experiments are being run to erase memory, to fracture personality, to rebuild the human mind according to the needs of the Cold War. Families brought children for treatment. Some left with strangers who wore their faces but had no memory of who they were. This is the soil in which Philippe was studied, a soil soaked with secrecy. So when clinicians described his hunger as too much, what were they really confessing? That too much hunger cannot be tolerated by a system built on rationing desire. Love must be portioned, anger must be contained, dreams must be scheduled, aggression must be drugged, the circle must remain unbroken. But Philippe broke it, again and again. Think of the metaphor, one child refusing his turn. Now scale it up. Imagine one worker refusing his shift, one citizen refusing his vote, one soldier refusing his orders. The refusal spreads, cracks widen, circles collapse. That is why children like Philippe are terrifying. They are not just individuals, they are contagions. And contagions must be quarantined. I will tell you something else the reports never said. The most dangerous thing about Philippe was not his anger, it was his clarity. He saw through contradiction. He knew when adults said one thing and did another. He punished inconsistency with fury. To the psychiatrists, this was pathology, but to me it is prophecy, because our world is drowning in contradiction. Governments that speak of freedom while building prisons. Corporations that promise connection while feeding isolation. Families that preach love while breaking apart behind closed doors. The child who sees through contradiction is not sick, he is awake. And what do we do with the awake? We silence them. I want you to feel this in your bones. The aggression you were told to fear may not be aggression at all. It may be resistance, the raw refusal to be lulled back into sleep. Philippe was punished not because he was dangerous to others, but because he was dangerous to lies. Let me ask you, what happens when a society punishes every child who refuses the circle? What kind of adults are left? The obedient, the numb, the ones who sit quietly, who consume quietly, who suffer quietly. A population trained to wait its turn forever, while a hidden alligator devours everything. And here is where Philippe's story ceases to be history, because you live in that population, you sit in that circle, you scroll through promises of endless affection, endless connection, endless safety, while the jaws close around you. You were trained to ignore the snap of bone, to believe the embrace is real, to wait your turn, even as your turn never comes. But some part of you knows. That's why you are still listening. Some part of you recognizes the hunger in yourself, the aggression you were told to suppress, the alligator that flickers beneath your own skin. You have felt it when you bite back words, at work, when you swallow rage in your family, when you suffocate desire in your chest. That is Felipe's gift to you, the reminder that the hunger is still there and that it is older than your obedience. So here is the forbidden thought. What if aggression is not the illness but the cure? What if the refusal to wait your turn is the first step toward truth? What if the boy who was labeled sick was simply unable to keep pretending? The clinicians tried to write him away, tried to reduce him to notes and case files, but their own fear betrayed them. They were staring at something too raw to tame, and they knew, even if they never said it aloud, he was not the only one. There are always others, children who cannot be circled, adults who cannot be silenced, voices that speak too directly, too violently, too honestly. They are erased, medicated, exiled, but they return. They always return, and that perhaps is the true horror of the file. Not that one child was different, but that difference cannot be contained. That somewhere, in every city, in every generation, the alligator is born again. The institution always wins, at least that is what we are told. But look closer. The institution wins only because we surrender before the fight begins. We give our children to schools, to clinics, to systems that decide what is normal and what must be corrected. And most never ask, who built this normal? Who profits from it? Who keeps the circle intact? Philippe was not the first to resist, nor will he be the last. His defiance was not extraordinary. It was simply visible, and visibility is what made him dangerous. Because the aggression hidden in every household, the suppressed rage in every family, is usually silent. It leaks in whispers, in headaches, in drinking, in quiet despair. Philippe refused silence. He turned the hidden into spectacle, and that is why the clinic could not tolerate him. Pause and remember, psychiatry at its root is not only a science, it is a ritual of authority. The white coat, the clipboard, the locked door, these are not neutral tools. They are costumes and symbols designed to remind the patient who holds power. The child does not decide what is wrong with him. The doctor decides. The child does not choose what is healed. The institution chooses. This is not treatment. This is obedience training. Now imagine the boy who will not be trained. Imagine the boy who rips the mask away. That is Philippe. And what did he show us? That the hunger is bottomless. That affection and control are twins, always appearing together, always inseparable. That no system can ever satisfy desire without also feeding the predator. The clinicians could not admit this, so they called it aggression. But aggression is only the mask. Beneath it lies something even more unspeakable: freedom. Think about it. What is freedom, stripped of decoration? It is the refusal to wait, the refusal to obey, the refusal to accept what you are told you deserve. Philippe was free, in a way the adults around him could not be, and that freedom felt like violence because it shattered the circle. This is why institutions always blew the line between freedom and sickness. They call the addict ill, the rebel delinquent, the visionary psychotic. Labels are cages, and once caged, you are easier to manage, easier to silence. But let me ask you, if Philippe had been born in another time, in another culture, would he still have been called sick? In some societies, children like him were seen as touched by the sacred, marked by spirits, chosen to reveal truths the village did not want to hear. The alligator would have been a god, not a disorder. The endless hunger would have been honored as power, not punished as pathology. Only in a modern clinic, under the fluorescent light of authority, does the sacred become sickness. And here is the paradox. The very institutions that feared him also needed him. Psychiatry feeds on cases like Philippe. Without the disordered, there is no profession. Without the deviant, there is no control. His resistance, his hunger, his refusal, these gave the institution its purpose, its legitimacy, its authority. He was both enemy and fuel. Do you see the trap? Now step outside the clinic. Look at society itself. The same trap repeats everywhere. Governments need criminals to justify prisons. Religions need sinners to justify salvation. Corporations need desire to justify endless production. Power always needs the deviant, because without the deviant, its authority has no reason to exist. And yet, the deviant must never win. That is why Philippe had to be contained, not destroyed, contained, made into a lesson, a file, a warning. This is what happens to the boy who will not wait his turn. This is what happens to hunger that refuses boundaries. You become an exhibit, a cautionary tale, a case study. But here is the secret the file cannot erase. Hunger spreads. Once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. Once you have felt it, you cannot bury it completely. Every child who watches another child refuse learns a forbidden truth. That refusal is possible. That obedience is not inevitable. That the circle can be broken. This is why Philippe is not only history, he is mirror. He forces us to ask, where is our own aggression? Where is our own refusal? We sit in circles every day, meetings, classrooms, voting booths, screens, and we tell ourselves it is fair, it is safe, it is shared. But inside, the alligator stirs. Inside, the hunger remains. And maybe you have already felt it. The sudden urge to stand up in a meeting and walk out. The flash of rage when you are told to wait longer, to work harder, to want less. The quiet, burning thought, no. That is Philippe inside you. That is the forbidden truth. Aggression is not the opposite of order. It is the shadow of order, the inevitable double that no system can erase. The psychiatrists believed they were observing a boy, but really they were observing a mirror of themselves, their own hunger reflected back through the body of a child, their own contradictions played out in miniature. They could not admit it, so they wrote him away, but the mirror remains. And now you are looking into it. Do you see the reflection? Do you see the jaws behind the smile? Do you feel the hunger beneath your own skin? Then you already know why this file disturbs. It is not about him. It is about you. Because the question is no longer, why was Philippe aggressive? The question is, why are you not? What has been broken in you? What has been trained? What has been silenced so completely that you sit, year after year, waiting your turn in a circle that will never close? Perhaps this is the real diagnosis, not of the child, but of the world. The world that punishes hunger, that medicates refusal, that calls freedom a disorder. The world that cannot admit its own alligator. And if that is true, if the aggression is not his sickness, but our cure, then every word written about Philippe was misdirection. Every note, every observation, every label was camouflage. The truth was too dangerous to print, but it lingers here, waiting for someone reckless enough to see it. And now you have seen it. So what will you do with it? The file ends. The doctors close their notebooks. The boy grows older, disappears into the folds of history, but the story does not end, because Philippe was never just a boy. He was a signal, a flare, a warning shot fired decades ahead of its time. You live inside the world he revealed. Think about it. The circle did not vanish. It expanded. The classroom became the office. The playroom became the marketplace. The psychiatrist's clinic became the glowing rectangle in your hand right now. Every app, every feed, every screen repeats the same demand. Wait your turn, follow the rules, share what is given. And if you refuse, the jaws appear. The alligator waits. Technology has perfected what psychiatry only began. Where the clinic labeled children aggressive, the algorithm labels adults disruptive, radical, dangerous. Where doctors prescribed sedation, platforms prescribe distraction. Obedience is engineered not through pills but through dopamine loops, endless scrolls and invisible filters that decide what you see, what you desire, what you believe. Do you understand? The circle has gone digital, and most of us sit inside it willingly. But the hunger never disappears. The alligator is still here. In fact, it has multiplied. Every platform, every brand, every institution whispers the same promise of endless affection, endless likes, endless connection, endless belonging. Yet, behind the promise, jaws snap shut. The more you give, the hungrier it becomes. The more you scroll, the emptier you feel. The more you obey, the more it takes. Philippe showed us this duality in miniature. Love without limit turns monstrous. Control without end devours. What the clinicians called aggression was only recognition that the embrace always hides teeth. And if a 6-year-old could see it, what excuse do we have now? Because the contradiction is everywhere. Politicians speak of freedom, while entire cities are blanketed with surveillance cameras. Corporations speak of community, while designing devices that isolate us further into silence. Families post photographs of affection, while privately suffocating under debt, resentment, and quiet despair. We are told the world is more connected than ever, and yet we have never been more alone. Do you see it? The endless embrace, the endless hunger, and here is the forbidden truth. You are Philippe now. You are the child in the circle, surrounded by adults promising safety while the alligator waits. You feel it in your body, the flicker of rage when your attention is stolen, the dull ache of desire that never finds satisfaction, the urge to scream in a room where everyone else stays silent. That is not disorder. That is memory. That is the ancient law rising again in your blood. But just like Philippe, you are told it is pathology. They call it anxiety, burnout, addiction. They prescribe mindfulness apps, productivity hacks, pills, distractions, anything to tame the hunger without ever admitting the truth. The hunger is not yours alone. It belongs to the system. The jaws belong to them. And maybe you've noticed, the more obedient you are, the worse it gets. The harder you work, the less secure you feel. The more you connect online, the lonelier you become. The more you feed the alligator, the hungrier it grows. This is not a flaw, it is the design. The boy with the dolls and the predator was not staging a fantasy, he was staging prophecy. A map of power that has now scaled across the globe. Endless embrace, endless hunger. Civilization dressed as family. The predator dressed as protector. And still, obedience. Still, we sit in circles, screens in hand, waiting our turn, swallowing our rage, pretending the jaws are not closing. But the truth is harder to bury now. The cracks are widening. Every protest, every refusal, every sudden surge of disobedience is Philippe's voice echoing through time. The child who would not wait his turn is speaking again, through millions of mouths. But here is the danger. Institutions learn, they adapt. They have grown more subtle since the 1960s. They do not silence hunger directly, they monetize it. They sell it back to you, branded as self-expression, as rebellion, as freedom. The alligator wears new masks, influencer, leader, liberator. But behind the mask, the jaws are the same. So where does that leave you? You can obey and feed the hunger until it devours you. Or you can refuse and risk being labeled, exiled, silenced. That is the choice Philippe faced at 6 years old. That is the choice you face now. And maybe you are asking, is there another way? A third path? A circle without the alligator? But that is the dream that keeps you trapped. That is the illusion the psychiatrists defended, the illusion the state sells, the illusion every glowing screen whispers into your ear. The circle can hold, you can be safe. Just wait your turn. But the circle will always break. It was designed to. That is the horror and the hope. Because when the circle breaks, when the jaws appear, when the hunger finally refuses to be hidden, then, and only then, do you see what has been true all along. Obedience is not inevitable. The alligator cannot be tamed, and freedom, raw and violent, waits beneath the surface of every one of us. So ask yourself, when the circle breaks again, and it will, what role will you play? Will you sit quietly, eyes down, waiting for your turn? Or will you, like Philippe, step into the center, embrace your hunger, and face the jaws with open eyes? The file is closed. The doctors are gone. But the story is not over. It has only shifted hands. It belongs to you now. The file on Philippe was thin. A few pages, a handful of notes, words like aggressive, controlling, defiant. But now I want you to imagine another file, not on him, on you. What would it say? Think carefully. Because you are not invisible, you are observed. Every search, every click, every hesitation recorded. A file built silently, line by line, just as Philippe's was. But your file is far thicker. Algorithms track your hunger with precision doctors in the 1960s could only dream of. What you buy, what you crave, what you fear, it is all there, written in code. And just like Philippe, you are being diagnosed. Not with words like aggressive or defiant, but with softer, shinier labels: consumer, user, engaged participant. Do not be fooled. These are still diagnoses. They describe how useful you are to the system, how easily you can be fed, how well you obey. The circle has only grown wider, and you are sitting in it right now. Think of your daily rituals. Waking up to a glowing screen, scrolling before speaking, feeding your hunger before you even rise from bed. Notifications scatter affection like crumbs, conditioning you to chase the next ping, the next embrace. Do you see the pattern? Philippe's dolls of endless love are now apps of endless validation. The same embrace, the same hunger, only more efficient. And what of the alligator? Look closer. It is here too. Every algorithm has teeth. Every promise of belonging hides the threat of exclusion. Say the wrong thing, follow the wrong voice, break the wrong rule, and you will feel the jaws snap. Shadow bans, account suspensions, job losses, exile. The predator does not need claws anymore. It has silence, and silence is enough. So let us return to the question: what does your file say? Maybe it says you are obedient, that you work long hours, consume quietly, wait your turn, that you have been trained well enough to keep your hunger hidden. Maybe it says you are restless, that you search for forbidden truths, that you stray too close to dangerous questions. Maybe it says you are both, obedient on the surface, raging underneath. And what do you think the system prefers? The obedient are easy, but the restless are useful too. They feed the algorithm new desires, new hungers to monetize. Even rebellion is a product. Even refusal becomes content. Philippe could not have known, but you must. The alligator eats resistance too. This is the cruelty. You are not only trapped in the circle, you are studied in it, mapped in it, predicted inside it. And the more you fight, the clearer your file becomes. Every click of disobedience, every search for forbidden knowledge, every moment of refusal, recorded, analyzed, sold. Do you feel it yet? The weight of the gaze, the knowledge that you are not a watcher, but the watched. Now imagine the clinic. Irons again, pens scratching across their pads. Only this time they are not watching Philippe. They are watching you. They note your hunger. They note your silence. They note the small flickers of aggression you try to suppress. And their conclusion will be the same as it was in 1960. Containment. Containment does not always mean locked doors or padded cells. Sometimes containment means distraction. Keep them scrolling. Keep them buying. Keep them working. Give them just enough affection, just enough crumbs to quiet the hunger. And when the jaws must close, make it invisible. A denied loan, a rejected application, a ghosted message, a sudden silence. Do you see now? The case study never ended. It only changed names. Philippe was the prototype. You are the subject. And yet, here is the secret the file can never erase. Hunger cannot be destroyed. It can only be buried. It waits beneath your routines, beneath your obedience, beneath the endless circles you sit inside. That flicker of rage you feel, that whisper of refusal, that is proof. The alligator is still alive. The question is not whether you are being studied. You are. The question is whether you will play your role or break it. Because here is the forbidden thought. You can become what the file fears most. Unpredictable, uncontainable, refusing both the embrace and the jaws. Not feeding the circle, but stepping out of it altogether. That is what Philippe showed, even as a child. Not that aggression is sickness, but that it is possibility. That refusal is still possible. That even inside the most controlled environments, a single child can rip the mask away and reveal the predator underneath. And so I ask again, what does your file say? More importantly, what will it say when you leave this circle? Will it describe you as obedient, another patient who accepted diagnosis, another subject who waited their turn? Or will it describe you as dangerous, as unpredictable, as awake? The choice for now is still yours. But do not wait too long, because every day you sit quietly, every day you obey, the jaws close tighter. And when they snap shut, there will be no circle left to escape. So listen carefully. The file is being written. Every moment, every action, every silence. What will it record about you? There is a moment in every circle when the chalk line fades, when the edges that once contained begin to blur. For Philippe, it was his childhood aggression, the moment the file could not hide his hunger anymore. For you, it will not be so small. It will not be personal. It will be planetary. The circles are everywhere now. Workplaces, classrooms, social feeds. Overmonths, families, all drawn with careful hands, all keeping hunger inside. But chalk lines are fragile. They break under pressure, and pressure is building. Look around. Do you feel it? The system is tired. The jaws cannot keep up with the appetite they created. Algorithms demand endless growth, but growth cannot be infinite. The circle has been stretched too wide. Cracks spider across its edges, and through those cracks, the hunger leaks. What happens when billions feel their hunger at once, not just for love, not just for attention, but for justice, for freedom, for the truth they were told did not exist? Hunger spreads like fire, and the chalk lines vanish like smoke. Picture the collapse. Cities where screens once glowed going dark. Networks built to contain suddenly failing. Notifications silenced. Affection withdrawn. The embrace gone. And with it, the quiet obedience that kept the jaws closed. The alligator wakes. At first, it is chaos. People tearing through routines like cages. Work abandoned. Orders ignored. Faces once bent over glowing rectangles now looking at each other, raw, unshielded. Hunger surges, and for the first time in decades, it cannot be distracted. Clinicians of the present, the governments, the corporations, the architects of circles, scramble to redraw their lines. Emergency laws, curfews, digital rationing, fear campaigns. But chalk cannot contain fire. Their notes mean nothing. Their files burn. The hunger is loose. You might imagine this as a disaster, and it will be. But listen closer. Disaster is only the language of those who owned the circle. To the hungry, it is liberation. To the studied, it is finally being unobserved, unmeasured, uncontrolled. But the jaws, remember the jaws. They do not disappear. They thrash. They lash out. The system that once silenced quietly now silences violently. Teeth on flesh. Borders locked. Weapons drawn. Entire populations declared unfit, dangerous, insane. The circle tries to return with iron and fire. This is the apocalypse, not the end of the world, but the end of its containment. A war between hunger and jaws, between those who will not be studied and those who cannot stop watching. Which side will you stand on? Do not assume you are safe. In collapse, the file is no shield. If you were obedient, you will be punished for obedience. If you were restless, you will be punished for restlessness. The jaws do not discriminate, they only close. But there is another possibility. When Philippe revealed the alligator, it was not just terror he created, it was clarity. He showed the circle for what it truly was, fragile, arbitrary, breakable. In that moment, he became more than a patient. He became a prophet, a child who showed that the predator can be named and once named, resisted. You can do the same. The apocalypse does not have to end in silence. It can end in awakening. The jaws can still be broken, not by obedience, not by rebellion sold back to you as product, but by refusal, by stepping beyond every circle, by becoming unpredictable. Do you understand what that means? It means refusing to be studied at all, refusing to leave a file worth keeping, refusing both the embrace and the bite. It means building circles of your own, not cages but fires, not chalk lines but signals, gathering with others who have seen the predator, who no longer wait to be diagnosed, who no longer sit quietly. Imagine it, a world where files no longer matter because the studied refuse to participate, a world where algorithms starve, a world where hunger is not pathologized but honored. The collapse is not the end, it is the threshold. The apocalypse is only terrifying if you believe the circle was safety, but if you know the truth, that the circle was always the cage, then collapse is release. So listen carefully. The jaws are coming, the chalk is fading, the hunger is rising, and when the collapse begins, you will have to decide. Will you cling to the circle, begging for the embrace that was always false? Or will you walk into the fire, teeth bared, unpredictable, uncontainable, because the file is not just watching anymore, it is waiting, waiting to see what you will do when the circle breaks. And make no mistake, it will break. Not in decades, not in centuries, in your lifetime, perhaps even sooner than you think. The jaws are already trembling, the chalk is already cracking, the hunger is already here. Do not wait to be told what side you are on. Choose now, because when the silence falls, when the screens go dark, when the last circle shatters, you will not have time to think, only to act. And the question the file will record, the final question, will be simple. Were you prey, or were you free? The circle is broken. The jaws have snapped themselves dull. The files, millions of them, are ash. And now there is silence. Not the silence of containment, not the silence of algorithms withdrawing affection. This silence is different. It is the silence of absence. The watchers are gone. The clinicians are gone. The endless notes and diagnoses, the constant analysis, the gaze that never blinked, gone. At first it feels unbearable. People who spent their entire lives studied do not know how to stand unobserved. They look for the circle instinctively, as if reaching for a cage that is no longer there. They hunger still, but the crumbs are gone. No likes, no alerts, no carefully rationed embrace, only raw need. But slowly the fear begins to dissolve, and in its place, something older begins to grow, because hunger, when it is not pathologized, becomes something else. Not a symptom, not a weakness, a power. Hunger is creation. Hunger is fire. Hunger is the drive to build, to shape, to connect without permission. And so the survivors of the collapse begin to draw new circles, not the cages of old, but gatherings around flames, signals in the dark, small communities at first, then larger. People sharing food, not for profit, but for survival. People speaking not for metrics, but for truth. People embracing not because they are conditioned, but because they are human. This is the post-collapse world, fragile, chaotic, but alive. It will not be easy. The jaws, though broken, will still thrash. Remnants of the old system will cling to life, trying to redraw the chalk lines, trying to whisper obedience back into the cracks. But hunger has been unchained, and it does not return quietly. And so you must ask yourself, what will you do in this new world? Will you cling to the memory of the cage, begging for the embrace of a predator that is gone? Or will you become something else entirely, something Philippe showed was possible long ago? Philippe, the child who revealed the alligator, was not a monster. He was not sick. He was a messenger. His aggression was the prophecy of collapse. His hunger was proof that the circle could never last. You are his heir. His story was not about him. It was about you. It was about now. The case study was always yours. The file was always yours. And now, in the silence of collapse, you must decide how it ends. Do you build new jaws, sharper, smarter, hidden in new algorithms, new cages disguised as freedom? Many will. History suggests we may, but you do not have to. There is another path, a path without files, without watchers, without endless circles of control, a path where hunger is not shamed, but shared, where refusal is not punished, but celebrated, where the unpredictable is not feared, but welcomed. Imagine it, a civilization without patience, without subjects, without obedience, a civilization of the hungry, uncontained, unashamed. It will be dangered. Rouse. It will be unstable. It will terrify those who remember the false safety of the circle, but it will be alive in a way the old world never was. That is the promise of collapse, not destruction but release, not apocalypse but rebirth. And so, as this story ends, I leave you with the final image. A circle, once drawn in chalk, now washed away by rain. An alligator, once feared, now nothing more than a shadow beneath the water. And you, standing outside the circle at last, file burning in your hands, hunger burning in your chest. No one is watching anymore. No one is diagnosing. No one is recording. The silence is yours. The hunger is yours. The choice is yours. And this time, whatever happens next, There will be no file to contain it.